Am I crazy, or is this beer a little bit hazy? Today, we are going to show you how to make this easy drinking 5.5% juicy hazy pale ale. Let's get started. Now, to make a hazy pale ale, there's a few things to keep in mind. We're not really going for the full-bodied, full mouthful, full creaminess, heaviness of a NEPA, but neither are we going for like super dry, clean smashability of a regular, like light pale ale. We're closer to the pale ale, but we need the haze factor and we need that slight silkiness on the mouthfeel to help carry our hops. So this particular grain bill is going to be made up of 76% pale malt, 10% rolled oats, 10% rolled wheat, and 3.6% medium crystal malt. The reasons I've gone with this is I want that crystal malt in there to add a little bit of sweetness and that little bit of chewy factor and keep it feeling like a pale ale, because I don't normally use crystal malt in my NEPAs. And then I've gone that half and half, 10% each of rolled oats and rolled wheat to help give that silky mouthfeel and particularly to give that haze. Rolled wheat in particular is excellent for building some haze. So let's get crushing. Now, let's talk about water chemistry. For our hazy, we are basically going to be running with an almost NEPA-esque water profile because we want to emulate the juiciness of the hops and help support the silkier body of the beer without having to have too much of a heavy grain bill towards having a high final gravity. Does that make sense? We're basically using water profiles to help us cheat to get there, but also keep things really smashable. So with that in mind, we'll be running with 135 parts per million of calcium, 8 of sodium, 8 of magnesium, 15 of sodium, 191 chloride, 98 sulfite, and 57 parts per million of bicarbonate. If you want to learn how to do full water chemistry profiles and understand salts in brewing science, check that link to that video right up there. It'll explain all of this stuff in a whole lot more detail. But for now, it's time to mash in. We are mashing in at 65 degrees Celsius. We're going to mash for 1 hour with a single step mash because this is not a particularly complex grain bill that we need to break down too much, so we're fine with the single step, followed by a mash out for 15 minutes at 77 degrees Celsius to kill that enzyme activity. As per always, if you are mashing in, make sure that you throw a little bit in at a time, give it a good mix, and then rinse and repeat until you've done all of the grains so that we avoid getting dough balls. Something else worth pointing out is if you do want to get a big old paint mixer built for brewing purposes like this one here, I'll drop a link down below. You can get it from Kegland, and we do have an affiliate program with them now, which costs you absolutely nothing, but if you use our link, we get a little bit of a kickback and it helps to support the channel just to go get your new brewing equipment anyway. So let's start blitzing. And like I said before, we kept the rolled oats and the rolled wheat separate, so we can go ahead and start sprinkling some of that stuff in now, as well as rice hulls. If you have never really brewed a whole lot with rolled oats, rolled wheats, rice hulls exist to save your life. These are the husks of rice, so they carry no flavor, no color contribution or anything like that, but what they do is act as like tiny little springs, little suspension pieces inside of the mash that separates all the grains a little bit more so that the water can actually flow through properly, and it helps with your efficiency and makes sure that you don't end up with a whole giant thing of porridge, which is called a stuck sparge or a stuck mash. So generally speaking, you want to run with 5% of the total weight of your grain bill being rice hulls. I'm not going to bother measuring too much today because it's not a massive amount of wheat and oats, but I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and throw some stuff in. But if you're playing this at home, I'd go with like 250 grams of rice hulls, half a pound. All right, there we have it. That is mashing in finished. Now we can whack on our top screen. If you're not using a system like this, that's totally fine. But what we have here is an overflow pipe straight down the center so that as we start recirculating this mash, it'll flow through the grain bed to help with our efficiency just a little bit. but just to prevent anything of the, like any of the grains going down there, we can put that top screen on. Now, time to start your clocks and set your mash to go for 1 hour, followed by that 15-minute mash out, and then we can come back, get onto sparging, and then start talking about the fun part of today, which is going to be the hops. We are now sparging. So what that means, if you're new to all of this stuff, and apologies to our regular viewers that have heard this same analogy 50,000 times at this point, but sparging is like wringing out a sudsy sponge. You got a sponge that's full of soap, you squeeze it out, you dunk it in fresh water, squeeze it out again, you still get a bit more suds and a bit more soap. Sparging is the same thing. Grains do the same thing. Even though they're draining out right now into the bottom boiler, we want to run some fresh hot water over the top of them to collect those extra sugars, those extra suds that are still trapped inside of that grain bed. By doing so, it makes us a little bit more efficient, and it means that we can get a bit more out of these grains than we would if we didn't do a sparge. And if you don't have the setup to do sparging, that is totally fine. Adjustments to the recipe in the description down below will have a sparge and a no sparge method listed in there. Now, we are going to rinse and repeat with this. We've got 30 liters of sparge water to get through. We also used 30 liters in the mash of this beer that I failed to mention earlier. Freedom units of what those measurements are. So once we've run through this 30 liters of sparge water, we can get to the exciting part and actually start talking about our hop additions for this hazy IPA.
IPA?
Oh, hazy pale ale. If you want to see one of our amazing hazy IPAs, you can check out the link to that one right up there. That is our one of our more recent NEPAs, which was a blood orange NEPA. Absolutely delightful. Highly recommend checking that one out. We are now boiling, which means it's time to add our first set of hops, which is going to be our bittering hops. This will be 10 grams / 0.33 of an ounce of Northern Brewer hops, purely for bittering units. That's going to give us 5 IBUs, and yes, that does sound low, but that's because this is not an IPA. This is a hazy pale ale, and even by pale ale standards, this is low. But I want my hazy pale ale to have that level of bitterness, but still kind of feel like a really sessionable, really smashable beer that emphasizes juicy qualities and fruity qualities over being too bitter. So I don't want to overpower the delicacy of the fruitier styles of hops by having too many IBUs in there. Now that's going to be 1 hour, and we're going to come back at the end of an hour because we have no more boil edition hops. We're going to be doing a big Whirlpool edition, however, to help push us into that hazy territory. So after this has had an hour of boiling, flame out and cool your wort down to 76 degrees Celsius. That in freedom units. We'll see you there. We have now reached the end of our hour of boiling, so it's time to go flame out, and we're going to start recirculating the pump to cool this beer down. And whilst this beer cools down, I'm going to be drinking another beer here. This one right here is our Blood Orange NEPA, if you want to check that brew day out. Link to that video right up there. Absolutely delightful, super juicy. What's also delightful is awesome hoodies in the middle of winter, because here in Australia it is getting cold. So get some beer, banter, and bloody good times merch in our store today. Link down below, or think about becoming a Patreon so you can support the channel so we can keep making great videos just like this one. Now we'll see you when it's time to add hops. We are now at 76 degrees Celsius, which means it is time for our final hop addition, and now things finally get interesting. We are adding 70 grams / 2.5 ounces each of Lupo Max Citra, Azacar, and El Dorado hops, which is going to give us a IBU of 18 and a total IBU for the beer of 23. So as I mentioned earlier, we are keeping the bittering on the lower side for a pale ale because it is meant to be leaning a little more into the fruity factor rather than being like a straight American style pale ale. So let's go ahead and throw these hops in. We've still got our counterflow chiller with now the cooling water turned off. So it's acting just as a whirlpool now. So we're gonna get a nice hop cone dropping down at the center of that so we don't have any filtering issues when we start pumping over to the fermenter. But the reason I've chosen these hops here is because Lupo Max Citra, well, just if you're unfamiliar with what Lupo Max means, it's basically hops that are crammed full of extra everything, extra alpha acids, extra hop oils, etc. So you get more out of those hops, so you can do more with less. And Citra is just a go-to for hazy styles of beer. Gives you that tropical factor, gives you that citrusy factor. It's just the backbone of what these beers are. Then the Azacca and the El Dorado together is going to give us a really interesting combination. El Dorado can kind of have candy-like sweetness as well as stone fruit sweetness, and Azacca's got all kinds of tropical goodness. So all of this together should make a really smashable, really easy drinking, but very fruity, hazy pale ale. That's the goal anyway. So we'll see how this comes out at the end, but once we've done 20 minutes of whirlpooling, then we'll start cooling down to yeast pitching temperature. Now, we are coming out at yeast pitching temperature, so it's time for that beautiful money shot. If you do the honors, Odin, you can travel over and witness the glory of a beer transfer. Voila. Now, we did dilute this thing by 4 liters because we were just shooting a little too high. It was going to be around a 6.5% beer. That's not really what the goal of this is. That's IPA territory. So I diluted it with 4 liters to bring that original gravity down to 1.05, which should give us a 5.6% beer if everything finishes the way that I believe it will. So the next time, no, we've got to talk about yeast. We do need to talk about yeast. We are going to be using Pomona, which is the new strain from Lallemand. It is absolutely delightful. It's the same strain that I used in my super juicy NEPA. This thing is just wildly fruity. It gives huge stone fruit and tropical vibes. And it doesn't ferment out super dry, which I don't mind for this one because it's going to be fairly fermentable anyway, so it should still have quite a light mouthfeel and be fairly easy to drink. But I really want to push the fruity borders and use a fruity style of NEPA yeast. Now, I'm not going to bore you with throwing this into the fermenter because it's just opening a packet. So the next time that you guys see me will be when we're ready to dry hop. It's not dry hopping yet, but I do need to talk about this thing right here. This is a wrapped pill. It's my new toy. I've got the other one that is sitting in a different fermenter right now, but this one right here is a new one that I've got that also has the wireless charging function, so I can put it on a wireless charge plate and it'll boost itself up and I don't need to open it, which is super convenient. And if you want to see a full review on what this is and how it works, link to that video right on up there, but it basically gives you a real-time read of your fermentation, of your gravity, of your temperature, etc., all in action, which is just immensely helpful, especially when you're trying to decide when to dry hop. This gives you a very good idea as to when you should actually do that when fermentation is getting towards the end. So I am also going to throw this into the fermenter so we can have some pretty charts to show you at the end of fermentation. And fermentation temperature is going to be 22 degrees Celsius, I suspect, for 7 weeks of primary, 7 days of primary. No, I'll see you at dry hop. It is now about day 10 of fermentation. Our gravity is looking pretty stable, so I suspect that we have hit final gravity. There's going to be a graph showing up on our screen right now so you can see what we're looking at. And it's time to do our dry hops. Now, with a pale ale, dry hopping is not strictly speaking necessary, but considering we're going for a hazy pale, it does make sense to try and boost that hop characteristics, get a little bit of extra juiciness and tropical flavors in there, and increase a little bit of hop haze because that's the name of the game with this beer. So we are going to be running with 50 grams / 1.7 ounces each of Lupo Max Citra, Azacca, and El Dorado. Again, just doubling down on increasing our tropical fruit characteristics, increasing that bit of haze, and doing it in a dry hop so that we're not increasing our bitterness overly much. Oh my goodness, these scissors. All right, now time to throw them into the dry hopper. Now, if you haven't seen one of these before or watched any of our previous videos, this dry hopper is basically a air-locked chamber so that we can fill this thing with CO2 with all of our hops, purge out all of the oxygen, and then that way we make sure that we are not introducing any oxygen into our zero O2 environment so we don't cause oxidizing of our fairly hop-heavy beer. This is particularly important when it comes to things like NEPAs and IPAs, and there's a link up on the screen right now that talks about this in 7 ways to make your best NEPA in 2025. Some very useful tips in there that apply to things like hazy pale ales as well. Now, I can purge this container using the gas post that you can see right there. We'll run this through a couple of times until we purge it out 3 or 4 times, then I'll be satisfied and we can go ahead and dry hop. And now it's time for hops away. Oh, a bit stiff. There we go. Also worth noting that I did do a trub dump before this to clear out the majority of that yeast cake that had settled down to the bottom. So we just got a little bit less yeast and hop interaction going on. The other thing I'm now gonna do is close off the blow-off tube and be running out of the spunding valve. I'm gonna set this to 1 bar, which is about like 14 PSI. And the whole idea behind that is now I'm trying to retain and capture all that dry hop aroma and flavor. I don't want that blowing out the tube. So just another way to try and retain some of those hop characteristics. But the next time that you guys see me now will be when we have a fresh hazy pale ale in our hands. And here she is. Now, it came out absolutely delightful. One thing I do want to point out is that I don't know how this is going to look on camera, but I suspect from recent videos, it might look oxidized. It's absolutely not. This is the best thing I can do to show you what this actually looks like in reality. It is a kind of a darker yellow orangish color. Imagine like the color of cheap orange juice. That's kind of what this one looks like right now. But the head is super fluffy. It hangs around forever. Let's go in for the taste though. That's good. Now, one thing I need to point out, this was kegged literally an hour ago. So this thing is a little bit raw. It's a little bit volatile. I know that fresh is best when it comes to hop forward beers, but you do kind of need to let everything stabilize, calm down, and get past the keg shock. It's kind of like when you bottle wine or when you bottle whiskey. When you first whack it into that keg or into that bottle and it's all been moved around and it's been turbulent, the flavors and everything get a little bit intense and not always in a good way. So it has got a touch of harshness to it at the moment, but I fully expect that to settle down in about a week from now. What I do get from this is like moderate pale ale bitterness. It's not as bitter as some of the most intense American pale ales I've ever had. It's not as soft and laid back as an Australian pale ale. It's somewhere in the middle. It's got that like level of bitterness that's enough to keep everything in check and it tastes like beer, but it's not overpowering the palate. But the actual hop aroma, oh, I like that. Okay, so we've got citrus first and foremost. Then we've got a little bit of a stone fruit thing going on, like a generic fruit salad thing happening. I think there's pineapple and mango in there. I think those are the two things that I'm getting quite a lot of. So as far as like, is this beer a hazy? It's definitely hazy. This might clear up a bit, but I don't expect it to ever fully clear up. There was just too much oat, too much wheat, too much hops in there for this thing to ever become a crystal clear beer, which is what we're going for here. There's definitely fruit character. There's a balance of the bitterness to the sweetness. So I'd call this an absolute success. I would love to hear what you guys have done as far as hazy pale ales go, or just like easy drinking hop forward pale ales go, because yes, I love NEPAs and I love IPAs, but sometimes they're a bit intense, they're a bit heavy. I do like things that are hop forwards, but light. Like it's easy to drink something like this many, many times without getting a full stomach or, you know, absolutely passing out. So let me know what you have done in the way of hop forward, easier drinking beers. And if you guys want to check out how to make an amazing smoked brisket, check out that video right on up there because we're getting into our barbecue a little bit lately. Anyway, we'll catch you guys next week. Cheers.